I'm Desi, and welcome to Bridging the Realm. Today, I have a very special guest with me, and I'm really excited to get into this conversation because it's something quite different from what I've done so far on my channel. So I think you all have something to take away from this conversation today. So my guest for today is Ian Graham, and he's a teacher and a channeler. He was born to a conservative family in Scotland and was a devout skeptic of all things metaphysical and paranormal. However, in 1982, at the age of 28, Ian's life changed during one of his meditations when an entity called White Bull appeared to him and told him that they will be working together. This was the beginning of a long-term partnership where for the last 40 years, Ian has conducted over 20,000 readings while working with and channeling White Bull. So as you can see, channeling, that's quite a different topic from anything I've done, but it's a really important one. And I hope that we can really get into the nitty gritty of this and make the most of it. So Ian, welcome to Bridging the Realm. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Thank you for asking me.
How's everything on your side? How's everything there going with you?
Very good, very good. Finally, we had a nice sunny day here in the Netherlands. I've been living in the Netherlands for 17 years, and I'm very happy here and very proud of the fact I've just got my Dutch nationality and I have my Dutch passport. So that guarantees me continued freedom of movement in Europe, I think, depending on what happens in Brexit. But no, it's a good day. It started well.
Yeah. Oh God, I bet you're probably glad not to be in Britain right now. Not to be.
I'm very glad not to be in Britain.
Yeah.
From the outside, one gets quite a different opinion, I think, probably when you're in it. But yeah, so no, it's quite a story.
So how long did you actually live in Scotland?
Well, actually, I didn't live there for very long. I was educated in Scotland at a rather, I'd call it Philistine school in Edinburgh. And I don't think any school was ever going to be any good for me, but it was the kind of school where if you weren't good at climbing mountains or playing rugby, they really didn't want to know. And I was usually at the back row of the chorus of the school play, so I didn't quite fit in.
Yeah.
And I think the last report I got from my headmaster, he simply said, having known me all of those years, Ian passes the time as time passes him. Whether that means I was already mastered living in the now, or whether it was I was already a born daydreamer, I don't know. But anyway, that was his summing up of my school career. So,
Wow.
sometimes I think it should be a flattery that he said those things about me.
Yeah. Well, I bet now you see them in a different way, but I guess back then it probably wasn't as big of a compliment.
No, it wasn't. No, my mother certainly didn't think it was a compliment. So.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's always one that doesn't fit in, but they have a completely different, future ahead of them. So, and
Exactly.
it sounds like you found yours very much.
I found mine, but only after a few years of really being in the wilderness. I think my family despaired of me because the plan was that my father was a doctor, so I'd become a doctor too. My father wanted me to play rugby for Scotland, but I can't catch a ball to save my life, so that was never going to work out. And in fact, I wanted to leave Edinburgh as soon as I could, and I went down to London, and my first job was as a lift operator in Harrods. Yeah, and somebody said, well, I was, Ian, that's your first job taking people to a higher level. So, but more important for me was actually bringing them down to the ground floor again. And still, I think important part of my job is actually keeping people grounded and bringing them down and not having them float away into the ethers. Yeah. So yeah, I started with that and lots of other jobs. And then when I was about 28, I was suffering from a broken heart again. And somebody said to me, why didn't you learn to meditate? So I found this place in London, which it doesn't exist anymore, called the House of Spirit. For me, a good Church of Scotland boy, this was just a little bit going too far. Yeah. And I was there, people were talking about past lives and spiritual possessions and all this sort of stuff. And I really freaked out. So I left and began meditating at home. And very quickly, I started getting this voice in my head. And I thought, well, I must be getting crazy. There's a saying, if you talk to God, it's called praying, but if God talks to you, you're schizophrenic. So I'm probably, going mad. And I even heard the name White Bull, but I dismissed that because I think my first record when I was about 7 was a song called A Little White Bull, sung by Tommy Steele. I don't know whether any of your listeners will remember it.
Oh, wow. What a synchronicity.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought, oh, this is just something of my past coming up. And then around the same time I met somebody and he said, it's an amazing thing about colleague's wife has started channeling this Indian. And I said, oh, come on, Bill, this is hocus pocus. It just isn't possible. Be careful, very dangerous stuff. Don't go near it. But I heard more about this, and somehow a seed of curiosity was sown, still suffering from my broken heart, thinking, well, maybe this entity will help. So I had a meeting, and I wasn't very impressed. But for some reason, a few months later, I had another meeting. And he said, you have to join my circle. I have to develop you. Well, I had no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
But being a good boy, I do what I'm told. So I went along and was in this group, and they'd been together for 18 months. And I was a new boy. And the first thing we did the first day was to meditate. And as soon as I closed my eyes, I found myself in an Indian camp, as clear as I can see you and see the room around me.
Wow.
And then the spirit, who we call teacher, began to describe to me all the things that I was seeing in my meditation, like he was standing next to me.
Wow.
It was kind of ordinary stuff like, oh, that's my teepee, and those are my children, and those are my horses.
Yeah.
And then the camera panned around, and there was a big Indian standing under a tree holding his horse. And he said, oh, and that one over there, that's my friend Weibel, and he's going to work with you. So I was completely blown away. I had no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
But a few weeks later, we were meditating again, and suddenly I had this weird sensation of my hands getting big, and my face began to change. It was like I was getting high cheekbones, like the Indians used to have, and my body was filling out.
Wow.
I was very thin in those days, so there has been a big transformation since then. And then this voice came out and said, I'm Whiteball, and I couldn't stop. And although I knew deep down, this is what I've come to do. But of course, my ego was ready for battle. It wasn't going to roll over and let this happen quite so easily.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating story. That's wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it wasn't anything, like you said, I was very skeptical. I was not interested in these things. I would say I didn't have a spiritual bone in my body. I was young. I had my life experience, but I knew nothing about metaphysics or channeling or anything.
Yeah.
I did. I was working a little bit with my hands as a healer, but that was something I couldn't understand. But channeling, far out.
Yeah, they're very far out. Speaking to entities that are not physical. That's
Exactly,
quite far.
exactly. And it was interesting because when Weiberg came, he gave me a kind of training, I suppose you could say, because it took time for him to learn how to use me as well. It wasn't about me just learning to have him.
Mm, yeah.
And one of the things he allowed me to experience was actually allowing, shall we call it a not so friendly entity to come in and to show what can happen if you're not careful. And that was really scary. And I was thrown on the floor and
Oh, wow. So
so,
it's like a mini possession.
like a mini possession. I don't know whether it was actually a pretend negative entity, but anyway, I was shown what could happen if you don't take the right precautions. So yeah, it's very important not to take for granted that every entity is a good entity.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
those in the spirit world too.
Yes, definitely. You have to be careful, especially with channeling. I've heard that you have to be very, very careful with who you allow into your field. So,
Yeah, yeah. And it's so easy we all have an ego, and it's so easy for the ego to be turned on and excited by a famous name or a famous biblical figure,
yeah.
and then you start losing sense of boundaries and clarity, and the next thing you know, yeah, uh,
Mm,
you're in
yeah.
trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely worth mentioning. So anyone out there who's trying to do channeling.
Yes, well, I would say, of course, keep well clear of it. But no, I think that the channeling is a very useful tool to have. But I think it's much better if one can just practice channeling one's own inner wisdom
Mm,
and
yeah.
be
Of
looking
their own wisdom, did you
their
say?
own wisdom, their own spirit, their own deeper knowing, their own connection to the higher power. Because that's something I think should be the aspiration of people, to just be in
Mm,
that alignment with truth, and then it can come through you.
yeah.
So,
What would you say is a good way for people to begin to do that, or to learn how to do that, to get into that state?
I think just giving yourself time, often to be quiet, just to go within, and to understand the relationship that we have with the higher power, whatever you want to call it, with all that is, and trusting the presence of truth within you, the spirit within you, and listening to hear the inner voice.
Mm.
And of course, then people say, well, I heard this voice, but was it real or was it just my imagination? And I say, well, it was your imagination, because actually the mind doesn't understand these things. So
Mm.
truth can only come to you through your imagination.
Yeah. Mm.
And just take it slowly, and check absolutely within yourself, is what I'm hearing true for me? And yeah,
Mm.
it happens automatically in steps of spiritual development, evolution, that you suddenly feel this connection. And I think lots of people have the experience of talking to somebody and then suddenly they hear themselves saying something. I think, gosh, that's rather good. I wonder where that came from, you know. So
Mm.
at that moment, they're connecting to something bigger than themselves, which they
Mm.
already know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that for me, I don't want to do myself out of a job, but I think that's the ideal way to maintain a connection to one's deeper knowing, to truth, and to be guided by that,
Mm.
rather than the mind, which of course most of us are guided by the mind.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's such a struggle to not be guided by the mind.
Exactly, exactly. And the mind goes backwards and forwards, past and future, and so on.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of talk nowadays about mindfulness. I think mindfulness is a useful tool, which is practicing being in the present, because
Yeah.
the truth can only speak to you in the present moment, not from the
Yeah.
past and future. Yeah.
Yes, totally. There's so many tools now, and yeah, a lot of them are really useful. I think probably one of the problems is that people just don't really know exactly how to apply them, and then that's when it gets a little bit messy. And
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Or I mean, it's probably was there for me in the first days, although I was always very skeptical. One part of me thought, oh, this is rather glamorous, you know, I'm a channeler now.
Yes.
Um, but that was very quickly knocked out of me um, when I realized actually it's quite hard work, and creates a lot of change in one's life. I mean, you know, my family were horrified, and a lot of my friends
Really?
left me, and it was total upside down in my life. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Tell me a bit about that. How did your family take it when you first told them what you're doing?
Well, I don't think it really went in. They kind of made polite comments, but there was a sense of course, I was disappointing their expectations for me, because I was supposed to become a doctor and play rugby for Scotland.
Yeah.
Um, and they were quite traditionally Church of Scotland people. But
Mm.
at the same time, because of the family connections I had with the Himalayan countries, with Tibet and Bhutan, so they're very happy to welcome friends who were Buddhists who believed in reincarnation.
Mm.
When it happened to one of their family, that was too much. They couldn't accept that.
Ah, yeah. Too close to home.
Too close to home, exactly. And
Yeah.
but yeah, they've never ever asked me about my work, and I don't bother telling them. And they're good people, but it's just, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
outside the box, and they're a little bit in the box as far as that's concerned, which is fine. Yeah, we all have our own paths to follow.
Yes. Yeah,
It
definitely.
seems to be something that I think is amongst my clients quite a common thing for people when they're taking steps on
Mm.
a path of spirituality, that they become outside the family, you know,
Mm.
the odd one out.
The odd one out.
Odd
Yeah.
one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the black sheep.
Like, yes, exactly, exactly. But
Yeah.
they're or we're the ones that are actually taking the steps to make the change in the world, you know. So
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, I totally
it can be lonely. Yeah.
totally agree with that. Yeah. So would you advise to those people who are kind of just testing the waters, would your advice be to just continue with that, with what feels right to them? And
Just what feels right to them. And if there's somebody you know who can guide them, that's good. And because there are lots of wonderful teachings available now on the internet, great teachers.
yeah.
And but there's been a kind of evolution, because when I started, channeling wasn't quite as common as it is now.
Yeah.
So people were much more involved in the paranormal and the psychic manifestations,
Mm. Mm.
which is not something that interested me. And it's interesting to see the evolution taking place amongst open people like ourselves,
Mm.
that really a lot more people are now talking about the word awakening and
Yeah.
enlightenment, and thanks to great teachers like Eckhart Tolle and Muji and so on. So there's a new consciousness that is coming through. And then I would say, well, if you're really going to be immersing yourself in that consciousness, you don't even need to think about channeling. You know, it's just
Yeah. Mm.
finding inner peace. That's the most important thing.
Mm.
That's what people long for.
Yeah, connecting with yourself, with your higher self.
With yourself, with your higher self, with the peace that is in you, because
Mm,
within us is always a place of peace. And one
yeah.
can always make a choice when one is aware of the mind getting very busy, saying, well, okay, thank you, mind. Thank you for being there and showing me the contrast with where I really want to be, which is within the peace. So, okay, mind, you can go away now. I'm going to be within the peace.
Yes, definitely. That's one of the most challenging things. But once you kind of learn how to deal with the mind, it's such a different place that you're at. That
Yeah, 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 yeah. It is, it is. And well,
yeah.
the opposite is this peace. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Or any way that your mind becomes your servant and you don't become its slave. I think that's the
Mm.
switch to make. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard in one of your channelings on YouTube that you did, that you have a video of, where White Ball, you're channeling White Ball. He talks a lot about this peace, being in this state of peace. And that's when really things start to kind of, it's almost like the universe starts to give you everything that you need, because you're just in that
Absolutely.
state of peace
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
tranquility, and you're not expecting anything, but at the same time, you're just open to everything.
Yeah.
And
There's no resistance. Because if you're identifying with the mind and the propaganda and the fake news that it gives you, then you're in the past or the future. But in the state of connection to peace, which is the same as being in the now, then you're in the flow. Yeah.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
And
yeah, totally.
miracles happen all over the place.
Yeah, yeah,
But
which is really hard to believe sometimes when you know you're struggling, you don't have any money, or you've just gone for a breakup, and you're like, why, God, why?
I know. But actually, I'm rather proud of the title of White Bull's second book, which isn't published in English yet, and it's called "There's Nothing Miraculous About a Miracle." And basically, he says that a miracle is just a byproduct of when spiritual law can operate freely in the space provided by a trustful heart and an open mind. That anything can happen, and that's
Wow.
certainly, I must say, what works for me.
Yeah. Wow. Trustful heart and an open mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good state to be
That's what
in.
creates a miracle. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Amazing. I'll definitely give that book a read. It's
Well, it's not in English yet.
over
When it's in
here.
English, I'll let you know, and it will be in English sometime this year, definitely.
Oh, amazing. Okay, brilliant. I'll be on the lookout for that one. But let's go back to White Ball, and tell me a bit about his story, because White Ball comes from the Native American tradition, if I'm correct.
Yes. Well, the story I was given at the very beginning was that he was a Lakota, an Oglala Sioux, and he died at the massacre of Wounded Knee in 1890.
Oh,
But he's always been very coy about his identity, and people have said, "Oh, I've read all about White Bull on Facebook or on the internet or whatever," and because White Bull was actually quite a common name, it wasn't.
oh, okay, okay.
There were a few White Bulls. Somebody told me recently they'd found all about White Bull. He had a brother called One Bull, and but I'm not myself attached to that identity, so I don't always have the feeling that when I close my eyes to go into a trance that there's this big Indian coming into me.
Yeah.
But people I know who've known Native American Indians say he's very typical in his humor, for example, of Native Americans. But he's not drawing upon his experience as White Bull anymore. In the early days, he talked more about his life as White Bull
Mm,
and the wisdom, but he talks sometimes about the philosophy, the way of life of the Native Americans,
mm,
in terms of especially now with the environment, of how for them everything, from the biggest mountain to the smallest stone, from the biggest buffalo to the smallest ant, were their relations. So he talks
mm,
about that.
yeah.
But no, it's much more universal wisdom.
Mm.
And sometimes I think, well, why has he chosen me? Because as a child playing cowboys and Indians, I always wanted to be a cowboy. I never felt interested in the Indians. Um, but I think that somewhere, and of course, that was just one of his incarnations. He's had many. He said he's chosen this identity because it was his last, not because it was his most interesting. But what was also revealed to me, because people who meet him say that he comes this extraordinary vibration, this energy of love. It's just love and wisdom.
Yeah.
And that he is in an alignment, in an array, with the vibration of St. John, the beloved disciple.
Oh,
And he said that he described it a bit little black spotlight, that the source of the light is that energy of St. John, that the apostle of love. And much further down, there is where Weibel is, about a centimeter off the ground is where I am. So when I'm going into trance, I can raise my energy to where he is. And then that wisdom comes through.
Wow.
So that's how it's explained to me. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's really
Certainly
interesting.
there is a very powerful presence that comes with him, which
Yeah.
I'm not aware of course. I mean, I'm aware with the fairies when he's there. So,
Yeah. So tell me
like,
about that. What does it feel like when you're channeling him? What does it to your body? What does it feel like?
well, when I close my eyes to tune in, I always go through a kind of ritual within myself, just to do dedication and prayer, and then I wait for what I call his pin code, so that I recognize his energy, so I don't let myself go until I know that it's there and I know it's him.
Yeah.
And then it's strange; it's hard to describe actually what happens, but my body starts filling up with some energy. I take on a new kind of dignity. I mean, I'm a normal slouch, and I sit in a chair. But
Yeah.
when Weidel comes, it's the shoulders go back, the back becomes straight, and people tell me that's when they feel his presence coming.
Yeah.
And then when it's happening, I'm aware of things as they happen, but I don't have a memory afterwards.
Okay, so you don't remember what's said
No,
during.
no, and it's like waking up from a dream, knowing you've had a dream, but you can't remember the details.
Wow.
And the part of me that's aware as it happens will sometimes hear him saying things, and I'm thinking, wow, right, well, that's cool. That's got to go in the next book. That's got to go on the website. And at the end of the session, I can remember thinking, that's great, but I have no memory at all of what it was that was being said.
Oh, yeah. But so you do those normally with people when you do readings with people and
Yeah, I'm doing mainly with individuals now. I used to do some group sessions, but I prefer working at an individual level.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. And tell me a bit about the because I find the whole Native American wisdom really fascinating, and I really love the way they put so much importance on connecting with nature and with the animals and having that sort of balanced way of life. So tell me a bit about what you've learned personally from all of his teachings about that.
Well, what he doesn't talk too much about that, but just one or two things that I picked up, that indeed his tribe were a very peaceful tribe. Not all tribes were peaceful. There were some, goodies and baddies even amongst the Indians, raiding one another and so on. But for him, it was a very peaceful tribe. They lived in the plains, strong family connections, and a lot of humor and joy in living. Once we did an experiment in this group where I was, there were two other people also at the same time beginning to channel Indians.
Oh.
And so once we three of us went into trance at the same time to see what the Indians would say to each other. And the people said it was like listening to the Marx Brothers, it was just,
Oh wow, that must be interesting.
yeah, yeah. But so no, I don't really know that much, but there was a lot of harmony and embracing of all of nature. Everything was part of the oneness, and yeah, which is why they became so vulnerable to the invasion
Outside.
of the white people, because they were so trusting and
Mm,
have that wisdom to recognize that they were being deprived of their identity.
yeah. Oh,
One of my favorite stories actually is about another white bull, not my white bull,
mm,
who I believe was the one that killed Colonel Custer, the white general.
oh,
And before he killed him, he said, "We were brothers before, and we will be brothers again. But this time, this is what I have to do." When he killed him.
wow.
So for me, that's this beautiful story of how, in the whole thing about karma, you know,
Yeah.
that we play a role in each other's lives, and sometimes we are positive influence, sometimes we can be negative influence, but
Mm,
actually it's all good. It's just like being a character in a soap opera. This is how we let the plot unfold.
yeah.
So that was a beautiful story.
Yeah, no, I find that really interesting. Tell me a bit about that and how the whole idea of, soul groups and incarnating within your soul group and having these people, random people, which are not actually random because they're part of your soul group, they play a different part in your life to maybe trigger you or help you or get you to grow. in a way. So how does that
Yeah,
work?
yeah. Well, a whiteboard describes it a little bit like a group of actors in a repertory company, and they change plays every month. And one month you play the goodie, the next month you play the baddie, and the next month there's a romance, the next month there's a thriller.
Yeah.
But you're all just actors in this drama.
Mm,
And so, as I understand it from what he teaches as well, that we come together with our soul group to play a role.
mm,
Sometimes it may be not a nice role, sometimes it can be a beautiful role, but
mm.
it's still a role. It doesn't define who we really are. And
Yeah.
because every soul is for every other soul for that evolution, therefore we come in and play roles that give us tests and challenges in trust and faith and forgiveness and whatever it is we have to learn in this life.
Yeah. So would you say it's a good way to try to see those any circumstances, especially the bad ones, because it's the bad ones that really stick with
Yeah,
us.
the ones you remember, yeah.
Yeah, and would you say it's a good way to think of it as, okay, this person just came here to teach me something,
Yes,
and
yes, yes, yes. In
yeah.
fact, I was a few months ago. I was taking a few weeks off to be by myself, and I was just reflecting on my life and all the things that have happened to me, the good and the bad. And it became very clear to me that everything that's happened in my life, even the most painful situations, everything was a grace. Everything was a grace. Everything was necessary to bring me to where I am,
Yeah.
to come to
Mm,
the point of acceptance, of forgiveness, of what had happened to move me on to a new chapter of my life. That everything was a grace.
wow.
Sometimes, if I hear other people's stories, I'm thinking, well, I can understand that they wouldn't see that as a grace. If your child's been murdered or some
Mm,
terrible thing has happened, a mortal illness. But I can only say from my experience, I've seen
mm,
everything. Even the fact that, well, my father died when I was 7, and which was a tragedy for the family. But
yeah.
even now, I can see, well, actually, that was perfect. That was perfect.
Mm,
Because, yeah, he was from another era, and my life, as it's turned out to be, would have been not acceptable to him.
mm,
But what I've inherited by being born into this family has been so important.
mm.
So, yeah,
Yeah, it's almost as if it teaches you all the lessons that your soul needs to learn in that
exactly,
specific life.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm curious, did that also make you see your breakup with the time in a different way? Did you manage to get
Yes, yes, it did. I mean, I haven't broken completely. It's only just my sister left now, but I I can see, I can understand perfectly why I chose this family and what I've inherited within my own self from in the DNA, so we say from my family and the stories. One thing, I I, I I do have a very strong faith, and that's not something I developed myself. I take no credit for that, but it's something that's just in the family.
Mm,
And so I've always had this faith that everything will work out all right because of the stories I grew up with around, especially from my grandparents.
mm, yeah.
So
And
yeah,
that helps you in your own work as well,
my
just
own work, yeah, yeah, and also on my mother's side, there's a very strong sense of duty. On my father's side, a very strong sense of service, and both of those are necessary for me to do my work. So there are
yeah.
these inherited factors that come.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Definitely, I agree with yeah, especially the ancestral stories that we inherit from our ancestors
Yeah,
as we
yeah,
continue to look
yeah.
back.
So yeah, that's exactly why I chose to be born into this family, and I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful for the inheritance in terms of the family story and
Mm.
yeah, what
Yeah,
is
and also what you've provided for people. So in the way in which you've helped them with all these things that you've, you know, inherited from your family, from your upbringing and your life.
yeah.
Yeah,
But it may sound strange, but it actually never crosses my mind that what I'm doing is helping people. I
really.
mean, I am. I get the feedback that I am, but it's like water off a duck's back. It doesn't. I don't know. It's strange. It's just this is what I do, but it's not
Yeah.
part of my conscious intent. Oh, I want to go help people.
Yeah. Would you say that's probably the best way to look at something, to do something that you really enjoy, and as a result that actually helps people, rather than I want to help someone and then so changing the perspective.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think it's wonderful to have that desire to help people,
Mm,
but and I'm not sure I can say I really enjoy the work either. um, I still have my moments of rebellion. I mean, white people must think, oh, why did I choose this one? Here we go again, more ego tantrums.
Yeah.
But no, it's just a deep knowing this is what I'm here to do. And I enjoy aspects of it. I enjoy meeting the people. All my closest friends I've met through my work.
Mm,
But it's not something. The work itself, just closing my eyes and disappearing, is not something that's great fun.
mm,
It's just part of the work. Part of the work. And I
yeah.
think that I had an interesting lesson from Whitehall quite early on, which I think has served me well. That I was getting, even when I was just starting, I knew nothing. People were giving me lots of nice feedback. I'm thinking, oh, I'm rather good at this. Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. I'm a good channeler.
Yeah.
And sure as anything, twice it happened. My very next client would come and say, "I'm sorry, Ian, that was a waste of my time and money."
Oh
So
God.
that was kind of why I was saying, now listen here, young man, don't you start thinking this is all about you. You're
Yeah.
just the instrument. I'm the one doing the work, so don't take the credit for yourself. And so now I think this is why, even though people are very kind in their responses to what I do, it just goes straight over me to a straight. I
Mm,
don't even hardly hear it.
yeah, I guess. Yeah, and you mentioned before about the importance of staying humble and kind of just being grounded in,
Being grounded, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I think there's a great danger the moment you start thinking yourself important and good at something, then inevitably the ego comes in. That's
yeah,
one of the dangers of channeling. There are dangers to it for the channeler as well as for the people who are going
yeah.
to listen. Yeah.
Yes, definitely something to remember for anyone out there looking to do that.
I would always say to anybody I say to people who come to me, and I'd say to anybody else who goes to anyone else who you're seeking advice, take responsibility for the fact that you're looking for advice outside of you, and always check, but is this true for me? Don't just take it because a spirit with a big name tells you so.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it true for me? And I've
that's
had people sometimes coming who've been to other mediums and channelers and get told, I think, appalling information, and
mm,
they're shocked, but so and so said it, so it must be true, and
mm,
their lives are badly affected by it. So you always have to take responsibility. But is this true for me?
yeah. I completely agree, and I have to say I'm totally guilty of falling into that trap where I've
Yeah,
kind of given my power away to someone or a card reader or a medium or some
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
psychic, and then yeah,
But
it's
we all have to go through that experience. I went through it too. I went through an experience of giving my power away to a so-called enlightened person, and it was one of the worst periods of my life. So that was my lesson in it. So, but I think it's a very important lesson to have as well,
mm,
because I think one's general evolution is about staying in one's own power, not giving it away, not putting
mm.
other people on a pedestal.
Yes, totally. And I normally find that whatever my intuition initially was saying about a situation, that always turns to be the right thing.
Exactly, exactly.
Rather than,
Yeah,
but of course we want confirmation because our minds just can't perceive that we have this other side of us that knows everything. So
yeah,
we have
yeah.
to get confirmation from an outside source. And then if it confirms it, then okay, I can do that. But if not, then that was my imagination.
Yeah. It's like when one sort of does something and then you hear yourself say, I knew I shouldn't have gone there.
Yeah.
How did you know? Because your inner voice has already told you, don't go there. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we all do it. We all do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a case of learning. But tell me a bit about what have you observed sort of in the last few years in the collective consciousness and especially in men, what's going on with men collectively?
Yeah, this is I find very encouraging because when I first started to work, I think 95% of my clients were women. A lot of those women were complaining about their husbands, saying, "Oh, he doesn't believe in all this stuff, and he just wants me to go back to work," and all these stories. Now the story is the complete opposite, and men are coming. 50% at least of my clients are men.
Wow.
The men are coming complaining about their wives because the men want to stay at home and meditate, and the wives saying, "Why aren't you going out to work?" So
Really?
it's a very interesting shift, and
Wow.
I see that the men that I'm meeting, a lot of the men who come to talk to White Bull are really setting themselves free from the archetypal roles that they've been expected to play,
Yeah.
and are making huge steps, sacrifices, even giving up their careers, and following their heart and following their truth.
Wow.
And I find this very encouraging. And I don't know how it is with the wives, but I think it's good that men are actually taking these steps and are awakening out of the programs and conditionings that they've been given as the male child. You've got to be the breadwinner, you've got to do this and do that. So
Yeah, which is a lot of responsibility.
lots of responsibility, and I think it's very encouraging. And I mean, they say that the world will be saved by women, but I think the world will be saved by the feminine principle, which is also in men.
In men.
So men are awakening to their sensitivity, and some of the men who come here, that, oh, what am I doing here? My wife told me to come, or my friend told me to come, and they're very skeptical, and they're very rational. But then they start to relax, and then they start to realize, okay, yes, this is something that is Bible is saying what I do feel in myself, that I want to let go of some of the old conditions, set myself free, not be a slave to a system. So I see this as not only with men, but with women too. Women are also, amongst my clients anyway, a lot of them are just wanting to change their lives completely and set themselves free.
Yeah.
And a great hunger in a lot of people for just being able to live completely in their own truth and follow their hearts.
Yeah, find their purpose. That's so important.
Find their true purpose, yeah. And so often the question comes, what am I here to do? What is my purpose? And the answer usually comes, well, your purpose is to be. You're a human being, not a human doing. And when you can be comfortable with just being, then the doing shows itself. The one that leads on from the other. So, to make the most of this incarnation, to set yourself free, to make your connections to the higher power, and be a presence.
Yeah. So how would you say, for anyone who doesn't feel like they have quite found their purpose or path yet, what would you say, what's a good way to start this process? How can they start doing that?
I would say start by accepting 100% exactly where you are, not making anything wrong, finding peace with where you are. And when you find peace with where you are, then things will start to move. So look at the resistances, look at the fears, try to let go of those, and just start with now and be complete acceptance of that. And then things will move. Yeah, signs will come, and coincidences will occur. And just also look to the feeling of hunger that you may feel within you, the hunger in the soul, and ask yourself, well, what's my soul hungry for? And maybe it's just to meet a friend for a coffee. Maybe it's to find a nice book to read. Maybe it's to go off and be in nature and be by myself. I think when you start getting these feelings and signs, you want to be by yourself or you want to be in nature, that's a sign things are starting to happen. Because I think we too easily forget that as human beings living in our crowded world, we need space. So I would say these are the signs that are there. Even if you can't see or feel what you could do, just look at these needs, these basic needs for space, for quiet, for feeding your inner life, and everything will come from that.
Yeah. Yes, that's a really good advice. So if people, because I've myself have encountered that, and I know a lot of people have. When you first begin your journey, there's you tend not to have so many people who are supportive of that, because you're changing completely 180 degrees from this life.
Yes, yeah.
So what would you say to those people who trying to explain themselves to their family or to their friends and trying to just find their way through? What advice would you give to anyone who's kind of going through that right now and doesn't quite have...
Well, I would say be very careful who you talk to, because probably at that point you'll get a negative response, and then you talk your power away, and that can be very discouraging if you get a negative reaction. So I would say look around you and see what meditation groups are available, whatever it is that turns you on, and just find somewhere to belong where you'll meet like-minded people, and not be too open with your friends and family. Let them react because they see a difference in you. They, oh, you're very quiet these days. Oh, you're feeling very peaceful. Tell me, what's your secret? Maybe then you can convert them to the path. But I think it's very careful not to be so excited about what's happened to you that you tell everybody and they say, oh, what a load of rubbish.
Yeah.
That's more or less what happened to me, so
Mm. That's
speak
amazing.
from bitter experience.
Yeah. I think everyone tends to go through that stage, but and then you realize there's no point in trying to explain yourself to them because they
No, no, if people aren't ready, they will never be ready,
yeah.
people, flowers bloom in their own time.
Mm.
And I think also there are some fantastic books out there. Go to the library, see if any books that excite you,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
look at YouTube. So many amazing things on YouTube at every level of consciousness. It's on YouTube. So it's just start working with yourself, and then things will start to unfold.
Yeah, totally. And tell me, have you observed any difference this last sort of, especially well, last year and this year, because there seems to be a huge change, right? I know there's been changes happening for the last like 10, 20 years, but especially last year and this year, there seems
Yeah,
to be like a huge change happening. And I've noticed in myself and in other people, you tend to either go really high or really really low, and there's just these two extremes. It's like
yeah,
there's no middle ground anymore. You either feel amazing or you just feel completely like you just don't want to be here anymore.
yeah. It's curious. I've noticed this a lot happening. People around me, and I've even had my own experiences of similar experiences as well. I think it's important, first of all, to be able to experience the full range of emotions from the high to the low. It's rather like a piece of elastic, you're stretching it.
Yeah.
Um, and therefore, you create a bigger range within yourself of feeling. When things are getting too high, then also you have to be careful and start getting grounded. Um, and because then you're too open and all kinds of things can start happening. So then
Mm,
I would say start walking in nature and maybe break your rules and go out for a drink with friends or whatever it is, but just be an ordinary human being.
yeah.
And if you're getting too low, which I know also is happening to people at the moment, I think a lot of people are starting to take medication they didn't think of before, or having breakdowns or depressions or whatever. Yeah, again, just talk to people, have good contact,
Mm,
and it will pass. It will pass.
mm,
But it really is a turbulent time, and it's like God had has his foot on the accelerator. We're all suddenly being pushed into this higher vibration and frequency, and everything
yeah.
gets shaken around. But it is for a period, and as
Mm,
long as you can also connect to your center as much as possible, where nothing changes, because we're experiencing all these changes, these ups and downs,
mm,
but inside us is a place that never changes. So when you can find that place within you, then I think that that's a good counterpoint to stay with.
mm,
Like on a cloudy day, well, it's cloudy here now, but I know the sun is still there. So the
yeah.
skyscape changes constantly, but the sun is always there. So
Yeah.
when you find the sun within yourself, that
Mm,
I think provides the balance.
that's
And it is something that I don't know when it'll pass, but I think there's a lot of fear, of course, in the world at the moment. So that's like the clouds as well. That's like the pollution, the fear. It's all around us. It's very hard to
mm,
not be affected by it.
mm,
And it's important to therefore look at your own fears and see, well, what external fears am I attracting because of my own fears?
mm,
I mean, if you walk into a room full of people smoking, you're going to come out smelling of smoke yourself, even if you're not a smoker. So you're going to be contaminated in some way. Therefore, you need to also take care of your personal space and be with right people that uplift you and not people who pull you down,
mm.
and allow for the change.
Yeah. So having those boundaries that you need to kind of insert.
Having those boundaries, yeah. I mean, make a new best friend, and the best friend you'll ever have is the word no. Because it's once you find it easier to say no, then that in whatever way you say it, then you're really taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
But
Which
sometimes
is so hard to say sometimes.
it's very hard to say. Then you can go for a walk, just say to yourself, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no. Find all the different ways in which you can say it. Let it become something that trips off your tongue easily.
Mm.
Because if we don't, we give our power away.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
challenge of this period, I think, is to really take back the power
Mm.
from anything outside of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And taking back the power means letting go of the fear. You can't be in your power if you have fear.
Mm. That's a
Yeah.
that's a
The Bible sometimes shares a subject for reflection, contemplation, is that how would it feel like to be living with a fearless, radiant heart?
Wow.
And what changes might happen in your life, who may leave, who may come, how would you change your life, how would you feel? Just reflecting upon fearless, radiant heart. How would your life be for you then?
Mm, that's a good one to contemplate on.
I think it's a good one to contemplate, yeah, yeah, because that's in a way what we all strive to be, to that
Yeah.
fearless, radiant heart.
Yeah, I think I have to say I've been I mean, I've been definitely feeling these energies, the highs and the lows. And when I'm in the lows, I'm finding it very hard to kind of just stay in that state of trusting that things will work out, you know, things will get better.
Yeah,
And I know a lot of people, you know, go through that when they're in the lows. So it's, yeah, it's just hard to maintain that state of mind when everything around you is just completely,
falling apart. Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, if one can train oneself to be able to be the silent witness to these lows, then
Mm,
the part that is witnessing is the part that is free of it. So, and then one of the great new additions to our English language, something brought by Eckhart Tolle, the pain body. And sometimes, if you can remember that when you're feeling these things, it's the pain body functioning, and you are not your pain body. And your pain body wants to pull you into this story because it wants to feed on that emotion of negativity and sadness and so on. And it's had its feast, and you feel better. Oh, I feel better because the pain body's had a good food.
yeah.
Just to remember that yeah, it's also something actually that's not really related to you. It's just
Mm,
old pains coming out, or something. I
yeah.
think it also is affecting people at physical levels nowadays as well. People are talking about the strange pains, and it's old pain coming out.
Yeah.
What we've
Manifesting.
absorbed in our childhood or wherever, pains, sadnesses, fears, and
Yeah.
so many people think, "Oh, I'm having a heart attack," but actually, it's not. It's just the heart is starting to open, and
Mm,
therefore the old pain starts to come out.
yeah.
That's how I see it, anyway.
Yeah. Have you seen this kind of trend, so to say, of people's hearts becoming more open, becoming more,
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But it's a new experience for them. You don't realize your heart is contracted because it's all you know.
yeah.
Suddenly, it's like the sun shining on a flower bud, and then the membrane around the flower begins to fall away and die, and the flower opens. And the Bible even says, if you put your ear to a flower as it opens, you'd hear the cries of pain. So yeah, a
Mm,
lot of we could, it only gets worse if you resist it, and just
mm,
to find peace. Yeah, that there's an opening happening.
yeah.
The body vibrations are increasing,
Mm,
and all lots of changes, lots of changes.
yeah. Yeah. So we should probably just embrace it and just hope for the best. It's gonna.
Embrace it, allow it, and observe it, and don't let the mind make a big drama out of it,
Mm, mm,
which the
yeah.
mind very easily does.
Yeah. So trying to keep the mind where it belongs, which is in the box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As your servant, not cracking the whip and making you its slave, and
Yeah.
taking you here and there, up and down, left and right. You know?
Yeah, totally. So you gave a really good tip about for people about listening and trusting to your intuition. I'm just going to read the paragraph that you wrote because I just find it really beautiful. So you've written, "It is selfish to deprive the world of your power and presence by keeping yourself small. Be sure to make lots of space for yourself." Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think that we're so programmed. Well, many of us are so programmed to put others first and to be polite, and to not hurt anybody by saying the wrong thing. And therefore, we sit on our power, what we really want to do, we sit on our passion.
Yeah.
And I think our responsibilities, especially at a time like this, where the world needs people in their power, in their fearlessness, following their truth, that we have to have the courage to take the steps to do what we feel called to do.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, we're just going to sit on this power, and we're going to go around in circles and nothing will change. But our programmer says it's selfish to think of yourself first. But actually, as I say, it's more selfish to put others first of all, and deprive the world of you in your power and in your radiance. Because if anybody has ever experienced being with somebody who has a presence, it's such an uplifting experience. And we can do so much for other people by allowing ourselves, not out of an egotistical ambition, but just to allow our true power, which is presence, which is therefore the highest frequency of love, to be in the world. That's really all we have to do. And then people will start saying, oh, it's so nice to be with you. I always feel good when I'm around you. You know, and you think, oh, what am I doing? But that is the power of presence. So I think it's overcoming this belief that it's selfish to be thinking of yourself. You must always be thinking of other people. It is a program a lot of people have. Or they see, for example, some of these men who are coming who are saying, well, I'm giving up my job, but of course I'm worried about my wife and my children. How will I feed them? How will I pay the bills? But that all falls into place usually if you just follow your truth, follow the call. And one of the things I said was that to have a vocation you're blessed. If not everybody has a vocation, but you're blessed if you do have one. But usually there's a price to pay for yourself or somebody as making that choice. But if you think of somebody like Mandela, which you wanted him to stay a good husband and father and not follow his journey to have all those years in prison and to be able to become a global icon of peace and forgiveness. So I'm sure maybe his wife and children would have preferred to have had daddy at home. But when you have a calling, then sometimes, yes, there are sacrifices that have to be made.
Wow.
For those who don't have a calling, don't feel a specific calling, then Bible says something rather beautiful, that the highest calling of all can be simply to live an ordinary life, but in an extraordinary way. And if you can do that, that matters so much, so much. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, that reminds me of I remember once I was traveling with friends and we went to this restaurant and the owner of the restaurant, he was this man that was just beaming with happiness and just joy, and he just made our whole, you know, he made our meals in front of us and he just made our day and our whole weekend, that whole trip. I remember that trip because of him, you know. He was I don't know, just like you were saying, you just have those people that just have such presence to them and you just feel so amazing when you're around them. And I'll always remember him because he was, you know, he was just a restaurant chef, which for some people isn't much, but you know, he lifted up your spirits, you know. Maybe there were some people who are feeling really depressed and they go to his restaurant and they feel amazing because they're around this guy. So
well, for me, it makes a big difference if I go to a restaurant who the chef is, because the chef's energy will go into the food.
Exactly.
I remember once going to a restaurant I used to go to often, and the usual chef wasn't there. And there was one there when I saw him, I thought, ooh, I'm not sure I really feel good with his energy. And I felt so ill after eating his food.
Oh God.
Yeah. So it doesn't make a difference who is cooking the food if they have a good energy. But this chap you're talking about, he just had presence, and it wasn't that he was putting on an act. This was the nature of his spirit.
Yeah.
He loved what he did and loved people So to be present, to be powerfully present, can transform another person's experience. Even I've heard stories of somebody visiting someone in hospital who was in a great deal of pain, and they just sat beside them, present, and the pain went with the person. So it can really, really be a profound healing. Yeah, I think that's almost a duty we have to our fellow human beings, to, as much as we're able to in any given moment, just to be present with them. And therefore to allow people to feel seen. Because if you're always thinking, what am I going to say next? You're not actually focusing on the other person. And one of the Bible's teachings I like a lot is that he said, if every human being one day had the experience of feeling truly seen in the depths of their being, in their innocence, in their beauty, within a generation you would have world peace.
Wow.
Because so few of us have ever had that experience of another person being fully present with us. And feeling seen, feeling loved, feeling accepted.
Yeah, that's so important.
No judgment, yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's so beautiful, Ian. That's just really, really powerful. I could sit here and talk for days about this stuff.
That's our contribution to world peace. Just whoever you're with, just be present with them and really see them, see beyond the personality. Just see them for the beauty of innocent being that they are, in spite of what they may be waving a knife at you. Yeah.
Mm.
Have I got time for just one more story because it rather illustrates this?
Yeah, yeah, go on.
There was a wonderful lady. I didn't know much about her, but she was called the Peace Pilgrim. And she would just wander from town to town, giving a story of peace. And one day she was walking down a rather dark street and on her own, and suddenly a man jumped out of the shadows waving a knife at her, obviously negative intent. And her reaction was, "Oh, thank God you're an answer to my prayer. I was just asking God, please send somebody to protect me." And this man was so transformed, he became a bodyguard.
Wow.
He was at her side all the time because she's empowered him for the first time with a positive role in image. Let him think he was an answer to a prayer. So we can turn people's lives around very simply.
That really, and it's just, yeah, and I think that's so important to remember. It can be something so simple as just
So simple, so simple.
being
So just to believe in others and believe in the goodness in others.
Mm.
And
Wow.
then it will change.
That's really, really powerful. Ian, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. And just to let people know, so you do private sessions. Do you do them over? You do them over Skype,
I
right?
do them over Skype, or maybe now Zoom. I don't know. I mean, I can do Zoom as well, but I normally do it by Skype. Anywhere in the world, I'm
Yeah.
doing sessions to. Only continent I haven't done a session to yet is Antarctica, but I guess penguins don't have too many problems. So.
Oh wow. And people can find you on www.mankindkindman.org.
That's it.
That's your website, yeah. Okay. Do you have social media as well that people can
No,
find?
I'm very lazy about
You're
that.
not on social media, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really on social media.
Yeah, but people
But
can.
there is a Facebook page of White Bull.
Yeah.
Where again, I'm very lazy about that, but some of his teachings are there.
Yeah. You also do some retreats in Greece, I think.
Yeah, I do retreats in Greece, on the holy island of Patmos, which I really love doing, and that's that's fantastic. I do that once or twice a year, and I have in the last years also been taking groups to Bhutan, which is a country I love and know very well. That's also fun to do.
Wow.
The retreats in Greece, they are really on the island of St. John, going back to talking about St. John, and they're always very powerful experiences, yeah. And also I'm starting to offer individual retreats at my house in France. So
Wow.
spend a week with me and talk to Bible every day and meditate and have silent days and yeah.
Oh wow. In France, did you say?
In France, yeah, in
Oh
Normandy.
wow, that sounds like it will be quite a powerful transformative week.
It can be. Yeah, they have to put up with my cooking. That's the only thing. But and
Yeah.
there's another website for that, www.tashiding.com.
Okay.
TASHIDING.
Yeah, I'm going to provide all the links for that in the description of the video.
Okay,
People
great,
can
good.
find you then. But other than that, thank you so much. This has been so interesting and such a pleasure to speak to you. Just all the wisdom has been amazing, and I'm sure so many people will find this really, really helpful, especially now.
Okay.
Everything going on. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Desi. Thank you. Bye bye.